I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, and my hand didn't shake once. My lawyer, Clifton Ibarra, slid the documents across his desk toward me. The ones I'd asked him to prepare 3 weeks earlier, back when I was still lying in a hospital bed wondering if anyone was going to come through that door. He asked me twice if I was certain. I told him I'd never been more certain of anything in my life, and I meant it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I ended up in that office on a cold February morning, signing away everything I had worked 40 years to build, and why, even now, I would do it again without a second thought. My name is Lorraine Beaumont Hale, and I am 68 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Guelph, Ontario. The same house I shared with my late husband Terence for 31 years before he passed from a stroke in 2019. After Terence died, I rattled around in that house alone. My daughter Vivian kept suggesting I sell it. Move into something smaller, she said. Something more manageable. I told her that manageable wasn't something I was interested in just yet, and she sighed the way she always does. Through her nose, sharp and short, like she's filing away her disappointment for later. I should tell you about Vivian. She is 41 years old, and she works as a project manager for a tech firm in Mississauga. She's sharp, efficient, and very good at organizing everything in her life except her feelings. She married a man named Conrad Sloan 6 years ago, and Conrad is the kind of man who enters a room and immediately starts calculating what everything in it is worth. I never said this to Vivian directly, but mothers know. We always know. After Terence died, Vivian called more often for a while, once a week, sometimes twice. But then the calls became every 2 weeks, then once a month, and eventually I would go 5 or 6 weeks without hearing her voice. When I did call her, she was always rushing. To a meeting, out the door, putting the kids to bed. My grandchildren, Owen and Petra, were 8 and 5, respectively, and I saw them at Christmas and for 2 weeks in the summer if I was lucky. I told myself this was normal. I told myself this was just how life goes when your children grow up and build their own worlds. I believed that right up until the morning of November 4th, when I woke up and couldn't feel my left hand. I had been ignoring the signs for months. Fatigue I chalked up to the weather. A shortness of breath I blamed on the stairs. A strange tightness across my chest that I convinced myself was anxiety. My family doctor, a calm and patient man named Dr. Femi Adeyemi, had been telling me for a year that my heart was working too hard and that we needed to talk about options. I kept canceling the follow-up appointments. I thought I had more time. I didn't. By the time the ambulance got to my house, that November morning, I was already frightened in a way I hadn't been since I held Terence's hand in his final hours. The paramedics were kind. One of them, a young man with a red toque still half on his head, kept talking to me in a steady voice the whole ride to the hospital, telling me I was doing well, that I was going to be okay. I held on to his words like a rope. At the hospital, things moved very quickly. There was a blockage, Dr. Adeyemi's colleague explained. I would need surgery. Not immediately, but within the week. They wanted to stabilize me first, run more tests, monitor my heart. I would be staying for several days at minimum. I remember lying there in that hospital bed, the machines beeping around me, the fluorescent lights casting everything in that particular shade of gray that hospitals specialize in, and thinking, I have to call Vivian. I called her that same evening. She picked up on the 4th ring. Mum? She sounded distracted. Vivian. I kept my voice steady. I'd always kept my voice steady for her. I'm in the hospital. I had a cardiac episode this morning. I'm going to need heart surgery at the end of the week. There was a pause. A long one. Oh my God, she said. Okay. Are you stable right now? Yes, they have me stable. But I'd really like it if you could. Let me talk to Conrad, she said. We've got Owen's hockey tournament this weekend, and Conrad's parents are coming in from Calgary, and let me see what I can figure out, okay? I'll call you back tonight. She called back the next morning. She had figured out, it seemed, that she could not come. Mum, I feel terrible about this, she said, and she did sound sorry, genuinely so sorry, the way she used to sound when she was a little girl who'd broken something. But Conrad's parents have already bought their flights, and Owen has been working toward this tournament for months. And if I pull out now, Vivian, I said. I am having heart surgery, I know. Her voice got small. I know, Mum. But you said they have you stable, and it's not emergency surgery, right? It's scheduled. Scheduled for Friday. I could try to come Saturday, she offered. After the tournament wraps. I told her Saturday would be fine. I hung up the phone and lay there for a very long time, looking at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in them, the way I used to count cracks in the ceiling of my childhood bedroom when I was frightened and had no one to tell. The woman in the bed across from mine in that ward was named Octavia Pemberton. She was a 73 and had a laugh like a foghorn and absolutely no patience for self-pity, including her own. Within 2 hours of my arrival, she had already told me her entire medical history, shown me photos of her 7 grandchildren on her phone, and offered me half of a chocolate bar she had hidden in her overnight bag. "You look like you could use some chocolate," she said. "I look that bad? You look like a woman waiting for someone who isn't coming," she said. She wasn't unkind about it, just honest. I liked Octavia immediately. The other person I came to rely on in those early days was a home care aide who had been assigned to our wing. Her name was Mercy Osibansu, and she was 34 years old, originally from Accra, and had been working in patient care in Ontario for 9 years. She had an unhurried quality about her that I found remarkable in a hospital environment, as though she had somewhere to be but had decided, for now, that here was where she was needed. Mercy wasn't my assigned aide. She was technically responsible for a different cluster of rooms, but she had a way of appearing when things were needed. A glass of water when my throat was dry. An extra blanket when the ward cooled down at night. A hand jump when the waiting became too heavy. The first time she sat with me was on the evening of my second day, when I had been trying and failing to reach Vivian by phone for several hours, and had finally put my cell down on the bedside table and turned to face the wall. Mercy came in to check on Octavia and noticed me lying there with my back to the room. "Mrs. Beaumont Hale," she said quietly. "Can I get you anything?" "No," I said, "thank you." She didn't leave. I heard her settle into the chair beside my bed, the one that had been waiting, empty, since my admission. "You don't have to talk," she said. "I can just sit here for a few minutes if that's all right." I didn't answer. But I didn't tell her to go, either. And after a while, in the dark quiet of that hospital room, with Octavia snoring softly across the way, and the machines keeping their steady rhythms, I found myself telling this woman, this stranger who owed me nothing, about Vivian. About the hockey tournament. About the in-laws from Calgary. About Saturday. Mercy listened. She didn't rush to fill the silences. She didn't offer any opinions about Vivian, which I appreciated more than I can say. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I'm going to make sure you have everything you need for Friday. You don't have to go through this by yourself." I told her she didn't have to do that. "I know," she said. "I want to." Thursday was hard. I don't have another word for it. The pre-operative preparations were uncomfortable and frightening. And every time I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, I looked up hoping to see Vivian's face. And every time it wasn't her, something small and stubborn inside me closed a little more. She texted that afternoon. "Tournament going well. Owen's team won the morning game. Thinking of you, Mum, sending so much love. See you Saturday." There were 3 heart emojis. I read the message 4 times. Then I put my phone face down. Mercy found me that evening sitting up in bed, staring at the window, trying to remember if I had updated my will since Terrence died. I realized, with a cold clarity that had nothing to do with the hospital air, that I had not. Everything was still arranged the way Terrence and I had arranged it together, in 2014, when Vivian was newly married and the future had seemed very orderly. I thought about all of it, the house in Guelph, the investments Terrence had built carefully over decades, the property we had purchased together in Prince Edward County, a small piece of land on a hillside with a view of the lake that Terrence had loved beyond any reasonable explanation. Everything had been left automatically to Vivian. Because of course it had. She was our daughter. She was the person who was supposed to be there. "You're thinking hard about something," Mercy said, setting down a fresh cup of tea beside me. "I'm thinking about what I'm leaving behind," I said, "and who I'm leaving it to." She didn't say anything. She just sat down. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said. "Of course." "Why do you do this work? This, caring for strangers. When the shifts end, Do you not think about all the things you could be doing instead? Mercy considered this for a moment with the seriousness I'd come to expect from her. My grandmother was sick for the last 2 years of her life, she said finally. Back in Ghana. And she was alone for a lot of it because the rest of us had come here and couldn't afford to go back. I couldn't be there for her. She paused. I think about her every time I walk into a room and someone is lying there by themselves. I couldn't speak for a moment. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said. It's why I'm here. And I'm glad I'm here. That night I slept better than I had in 3 days. The surgery was on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. They came to prep me at 6:30. And I lay in that narrow corridor outside the operating theater watching the lights slide by overhead, thinking about Terrence, thinking about the land in Prince Edward County, thinking about Mercy's grandmother alone in a house in Accra. I thought about what it means to show up for someone. Not the easy showing up. The showing up that costs you something, that requires you to rearrange your life around another person's need. The last thing I remember before the anesthetic took hold was thinking, I know exactly what I want to do. I woke up 6 hours later with a tight ache in my chest and an IV in my arm and Mercy sitting in the chair beside my bed reading a book. You're here, I said, or tried to say. My voice came out in a croak. She looked up immediately, set the book down. I'm here, she said. Everything went well, doctor. Adeyemi said it went very well. I closed my eyes again. Thank you, I managed. Rest, she said. I rested. Vivian arrived on Saturday at noon. She came in carrying a large arrangement of flowers and a canvas tote bag from a bakery in Mississauga, and she was wearing the coat I'd given her 2 Christmases ago, the charcoal gray one. She looked tired and bright-eyed at the same time, the way people do when they've driven a long distance and are using adrenaline to cover the guilt. She hugged me carefully, mindful of the tubes and monitors, and I let her. Mum, she said. You look okay. Better than I expected. The surgery went well, I told her. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. She pulled the chair close to my bed and sat down and took my hand. I've been thinking about it the whole drive down. I should have come on Friday. Yes, I said, you should have. She looked at me. Vivian wasn't used to me agreeing so plainly. I had spent most of her life softening things, cushioning my disappointments in qualifications and reassurances, the way mothers do. The tournament and Conrad's parents. I know, I said. You explained. She was quiet. She looked at our hands. Was anyone here with you? She asked after a while. Yes, I said. Mercy was here. Who is Mercy? I told her. I told her about Mercy appearing that first night when I'd turned to face the wall, about the tea, the blanket, the quiet company, about the conversation about Mercy's grandmother, about waking up after surgery to find her sitting there with a book. Vivian listened. When I finished, she looked, I thought, relieved, as if the existence of Mercy meant that my being alone was not entirely her responsibility. That someone else had handled it. That look told me everything I needed to know. We visited for 2 hours. She showed me videos of Owen's tournament on her phone. His team had won. He was very pleased with himself, she said. And I said that was wonderful, and I meant it, because Owen's happiness is real to me. It lives in my chest the way only grandchildren can. But I kept thinking about that relieved look on Vivian's face, and something in me that had been wavering for days grew still and settled. Before she left, she hugged me again and said she would come back next weekend, once I was home and settled. You don't have to, I said. She looked at me strangely. Mum, of course I will. I mean it, Vivian. You don't have to feel obligated. She kissed my cheek and promised she would call every day. She did call for the first week. Every day, just as she'd promised. Then every other day. Then the calls became texts, and the texts became fewer. And 5 weeks after my surgery, I went 9 days without hearing her voice. I was not surprised. I was not even, by then, particularly hurt. I was only certain. I called Clifton Ibarra the day after I came home from the hospital. He had been my lawyer since Terrence and I bought the Guelph house, and he is a meticulous and unflappable man who has seen enough of life not to be startled by most things. He was startled slightly by what I asked him to do. I want to change my will, I told him. Completely. I explained what I wanted. He asked his questions, the right questions, the careful ones. Was I of sound mind? Was I under any kind of pressure? Was this a decision I had considered fully? I've been considering it since before I went into the surgery, I said. I want to leave the house, the investments, and the peak property to Mercy Osi Bonsu. She works in patient care at the hospital. I have her contact information. I want the will structured so that my granddaughter Petra's education is covered through a designated trust. Conrad cannot touch that money. Vivian cannot touch that money. It goes directly to Petra when she turns 19 for post-secondary use. And your grandson? Owen? Owen has Conrad's parents. Owen will have every advantage. Petra is quieter. She's the one who needs protecting. Clifton was quiet for a moment. And Vivian herself? Nothing? Nothing that Conrad can reach, I said. I'm leaving Vivian my mother's jewelry and the cedar chest from the hallway. The things that mean something, not the things that can be sold. Another pause. All right, he said. I'll draw up the documents. I want to tell you about the conversation I had with Mercy before I signed anything. That felt important to me. Not to do it in secret, not to present her with a surprise after the fact. I asked her to meet me for tea at a bakery on Wyndham Street, 3 weeks after I came home. She came in looking a little uncertain. I think she could tell from my tone on the phone that something significant was happening. She sat across from me and wrapped both hands around her mug and waited. I told her what I'd decided. All of it, clearly and without ceremony. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, Mrs. Beaumont-Hale, I don't want you to feel like Mercy! I held up one hand. I need you to listen to me completely before you say anything. Can you do that? She nodded. I have worked my whole life, I said. 40 years of teaching secondary school in this city. Terrence worked just as hard. What we built together. And we built it with the intention that it would go to the people who mattered most to us. Vivian matters to me. She will always matter to me. But I have had a very clear window these last few weeks into what I mean to her. And I am not going to pretend, at 68 years old and fresh out of heart surgery, that the view through that window is something I can ignore. I paused, took a sip of my tea. You sat beside me when no one else did. You didn't do it for money. You didn't do it because I'm your family. You did it because your grandmother was once alone in a room somewhere and no one could get to her, and you decided to make that mean something. That's not a small thing. That is the whole thing. Mercy's eyes were bright. She blinked once carefully. The house might need some work, I added. The roof should be looked at in the spring. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half something else entirely. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I told her. Just, if you're ever in Guelph and you feel like having tea with an old woman, I'd like that. I'd like that too, she said. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. Clifton witnessed them. His assistant witnessed them. I drove myself home through a light snow, the kind of snow that doesn't stick, that just floats and vanishes when it touches the ground. Vivian found out 6 months later, through a conversation with Clifton that I had anticipated and prepared for. She called me that evening. She was not shouting. Vivian doesn't shout, but her voice had a tight, controlled quality that I recognized from her teenage years, when she was angry and trying to be adult about it. I don't understand, she said. Help me understand, Mum. I think you do understand, I said gently. I think you understand better than you want to. She's a stranger. She was a stranger, I said. I sat in a hospital bed for 8 days before my heart surgery, Vivian. I called you the evening I was admitted. You came on Saturday. Mercy was there when I woke up on Friday. Silence. I'm not punishing you, I said. I want you to know that. This isn't about punishment. Petra's education is protected. You have your mother's jewelry, the cedar chest, everything in it. But the house, the land, the money. Those go to the person who was there. That's the only logic I have. That's all I have. She was quiet for a long time. I should have come on Friday, she finally said. Her voice had changed. The tight control was gone. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm sorry, Mum, I know you are. I meant it, and I forgive you. I want you to know that too. Forgiveness and inheritance are just different things. That's all. She cried then, quietly. And I let her. And I sat with her through the phone the way I'd sat with her through every hard thing since she was small. I'm still in the Guelph house. The will doesn't change anything about right now. I have every intention of being here for another 20 years at least, and if that sounds optimistic for a woman with a recently repaired heart. Well, Dr. Adeyemi says the surgery went exceptionally well and that I am, in his words, stubbornly resilient. I have decided to take that as a compliment. Mercy and I do have tea. More often than I expected, actually. She comes on Sunday afternoons when her shift schedule allows, and we sit in my kitchen, and she tells me about her work, and I tell her about the years I spent teaching grade 10 English in this city. And we talk about her grandmother, and we talk about what it means to choose to show up for people. Owen and Petra came for Easter this year, and Petra, who is quiet and watchful the way I was at her age, sat beside Mercy on the porch for almost an hour. I watched them through the kitchen window, this child who is mine and this woman who chose me. And I thought, this is what family actually looks like. Not just blood, not just obligation, but the willingness, every single time, to walk through the door. The land in Prince Edward County is still there on its hillside, looking out over the lake. I've been up twice since the surgery. The second time, I brought Mercy. We stood at the edge of the hill in the late afternoon light, the lake going silver in front of us. And I told her what Terence used to say about this place, that it was the only piece of ground he'd ever stood on that made him feel properly small, in the good way, the way that reminds you that you are part of something much larger than yourself. Mercy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can see why he loved it. Yes, I said. So can I. We stood there until the light went, and then we walked back to the car together, and neither of us felt the need to say anything more.